question is, because I think I had an interview with another medical platform, and it was also about, data ownership,
Sure.
Giving back to the patients.
Sure.
But in that case, because why don't you just use the blockchain to secure the ownership, so that only the patient can actually share this information to whom he wants to share, right? Without the legal enforcement feature. I mean, is that necessary?
Well, it is absolutely necessary, but it's necessary to be done with the legal enforcement, because most of the patients have already given up rights and they didn't know they gave them up.
Okay.
They agreed to the 23andMe terms and conditions to allow them to, because they didn't read all the fine print. They're not lawyers. They don't understand the ramifications of what they've already agreed to. So in order to take that back, you have to have a legal mechanism with very sophisticated attorneys. We have DLA Piper is our legal counsel for, and they have nexus in 140 countries around the world. It's the world's largest law firm, because they have the muscle to help us navigate through the difference in jurisdictions between the Philippines and Korea and China and Canada and the United States and Mexico. They all have different legal systems. They all have.
So what you're saying is that, the medical platform we're talking about,
Yes.
they didn't have any legal enforcement feature in it, right? In that case, even though the doctor, of course, using the blockchain will give the data ownership to the patient, but at the same time, he most probably have a copy of that, and he will just distribute it without the permission of the patient. That kind of thing can happen, right?
That kind of thing happens all the time.
All right.
I mean, look at all the things
All
that
right.
are happening in social media, where they're just taking people's information and
All right.
utilizing it in ways that the patient,
All right.
the person, never agreed
Yeah,
to.
I agree. It makes sense because it's always like I said, right? Because these data management platforms,
Yep.
they say that as a user I will have the ownership, but at the beginning somebody gave it to me, right? Somebody gave it to me, right?
Correct.
And if he uses it, how can I know that, right?
You wouldn't.
Yeah. So it's.
I mean, think about it. You walk
it's kind
into,
of a bull, the other platforms actually, I guess.
Yeah, we're not saying that there aren't other solutions. Of course there are going to be many other solutions, and we do not want to reinvent any wheels that are already being invented. We want to partner with the very best, and specifically in the blockchain industry, and be able to support them. But there are many solutions that are not blockchain related that can benefit from this as their first entry into the marketplace, and garner opportunities for the patients to get control of their information.
But if I see, just in the medical industry, I think, actually the illegal data sharing will happen, from actually the how can I put it, like from the research clinics, the doctors, right? Most probably it will happen on their sides.
Well, so it is really bad right now. The two major reasons clinical research fails, small cap pharma fails. Number one is regulatory compliance, failure to cross T's and dot I's. They conduct medical research, they kill a patient, and then that patient, the family, the lawyers sue, and that company dies. The number two reason is because that small cap pharma can't find enough patients. And so these pharmaceutical companies are paying anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 per patient to find them just to participate in their clinical research trial. That's why these drugs cost up to $5 billion to create and take 10 years to do. It's an industry that is filled with people that are trying to find out where to find a patient. Because there's a $100,000 price tag if you can find that patient. They're not going to respect your privacy. They're going to go through medical records and they'll find them from wherever they can find them to see if you will qualify to be a part of their clinical trial. Right?
Yeah,
and so this is, there are many industries that are utilizing what I call dirty data. Like I said before, clean energy, dirty energy. We had dirty data, now we can have clean data.
All right, but using your platform, they can just reach out to the users of your platform, right? And then they can buy the data actually, right?
Right, and the user can decide whether or not they want to allow that to happen and under which terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And then, if they violate those terms and conditions, then they can sue them and get money for being violated.
The user doesn't even have to take care of the legal enforcement actually, right?
That's correct.
Because that's already encrypted in the smart contract.
That's correct.
All right, okay, I got it. And where do you make profit from that?
So we charge per transaction in creation of these legal smart contracts and recording of that data, and for the access to the API for login adjudication and identity scoring.
All right. Okay. And where in this whole picture is actually what is the blockchain doing here? In this whole picture.
Yeah. So at the most fundamental level, it's creating a private repository of the legal smart contracts that only the parties to that smart contract can gain access to, and that's taking a fingerprint of that and storing it on the public chain, so that now there is a public record that contract exists, such that
But the private is vulnerable then, right? The private storage, it could be vulnerable.
No, because all parties have a copy of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is and if there was to ever be a change in this, then the fingerprint that is stored on the public chain would no longer match up.
All right.
So that is what actually gives you the independent third party ability to say, from an evidentiary proceeding perspective, that the chain of custody of the contract and the fact of who signed what, when, where, for what, when, where, and how, it can be proven in a court of law, because you must be able to admit the evidence in order to resolve the conflict, if you can't do it automatically.
But I mean, that kind of procedure is very something new, to the court of law, right? I mean, how are you working on that side? Because if it want to be
today, if I entered into an agreement with you, I would sign paper, you would sign paper,
Right.
The lawyers would sign paper, you would get a copy, I would get a copy, your lawyer would have a copy in his file, my lawyer would have a copy in his file, and hopefully we never need to fight,
Yeah.
right? But if something happens and we have to fight, and I can go and get my copy and I bring it in and show it to the court, and the court says, well, how do I know that you haven't changed that, right? And that's when the attorney would say, well, here's the copy that the attorney had. It's date and time stamped and notarized, and as an officer of the court, I'm attesting that this is the contract that was entered into. Mm-hmm. And so if your contract, if you modified or tried to change your contract, that would be even another criminal offense, as opposed to us. What would normally happen is we would both agree this, is the terms and conditions that were violated, or were they violated? So those are the questions. And so what we're doing is really the same thing as the file cabinet that you have, and storing that contract over here so that you can gain access to it. All parties can go back and look at it, and they know that it hasn't changed.
You think, currently, is that accepted by the court of law?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
As evidence?
Yes.
You have a precedent or something?
Yes, it's in many different states, in many different countries. The sanctity of that from a cryptographic perspective is widely accepted. So this is really no different than using digital signatures in DocuSign or other types of activities like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what else? The usage of the blockchain. That's one major. What about the identification process?
So the identification process is doing the same thing, where what we are doing is when you log in and you send, and the system that you're logging into sends a token request to us, our system then adjudicates you. So it actually asks for additional information that you must provide in order to increase your score.
Like fingerprints or social media.
Yep, all of those types of things. And then those little small pieces of metadata are put into a package and recorded onto a blockchain, and then a fingerprint of that is recorded onto a public chain, in our case into Ethereum.
And where's the scoring system located?
The scoring system is actually a smart contract in and of itself.
On the public chain?
It will be, yes.
Is that already developed?
It is developed. It's in test and integration right now for those 1.1 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the token utility? What is the use of your tokens?
So the use of our tokens are for making all of this work. We require tokens in order to have these smart contracts process and create an identity, or process and create one of these smart contract fabrics, the legal fabric, both of which require EXO token.
What do you mean by require?
In other words, no different than paying gas, right? You have to submit a token in order for the system to do these and record this data.
All right, I understand. So the user also has to pay?
Well, there's really a zero-sum gain for the user. But yes, the user has to pay, but usually somebody else is paying much more. And there's just the token is being used because the user is a party to the transaction, and there needs to be a mechanism for recording that was that individual and it was his token and it came out of his wallet and it performed this transaction, and based on the terms and conditions of that transaction, there may even be a payment that comes back to that end user for the use of their data.
Okay, and of course, these clinical research centers or hospitals or doctors, they have to pay if they want to get access to the
That's
data
correct.
of the users, right?
Yes, they do.
That's going to be very big, right?
Yes, and that's why we're setting up 1.1 million wallets, and we're putting EXO tokens in them. I call it the Larry Ellison strategy. If you're Larry Ellison and you want to sell Oracle software into a known Microsoft shop, how would you go about do that? If you let's say. Let's pretend GE is a Microsoft shop. Well, what if you could give 100 shares of Oracle to all GE employees and stake it for 1 year? What do you think the next conversation, the next day is at the IT meeting, at GE? Everybody, all the GE employees will be, hey, we love Microsoft, but if we looked at Oracle lately,
yeah, of
right?
course, yeah.
Because people are coin operated.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're incentivizing the entire industry. Those 1.1 million people work for 50,000 different hospitals, universities, clinical research organizations, doctors' offices, practices, ambulances. They're all providing medical functionality today,
right.
And they will all have these tokens. So they will be incentivized to tell their organizations, hey, take a look at this. Take a look at this. Just take a look at this. And they will then want to learn much about the entire crypto space, right?
Okay, what about the users?
The users?
Yeah.
They are the users. They're the first.
No, I'm talking about the patients. Is there any incentivization for them as well?
Well, yes. So there is. The incentivization for patients tends to not necessarily be financial, though it can be. Remember, what we're providing them is greater control. So it's really more about providing peace of mind to the patients. But it is possible, and that someone would want to make an offering that would include financial remuneration directly to those patients. Absolutely.
All right.
Because it may be direct or it may be indirect. Indirect meaning, listen, if you use my medical data, I make it available to you for clinical research. I'm fine with that. But if you use my data, it's a part of creating a blockbuster new drug, then I want a part of the revenue share. Because you used me, right? You should create a blockbuster drug and then be selling it to me. And you found that cure, you found that solution by utilizing my information, and now you want to charge me for the rest of my life to help me from the disease that I gave you my information to try to cure? That makes no sense, right? In this world, it is very easy that we can make it, that whoever is contributing the information or the data should be able to share in that reward. That's what a meritocracy is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But one worry I have still is that because the legal area is very complicated, and it's really case by case. So how can you serve that? Because for instance, even the medical industry, there will be so many cases, different legal cases as per the patient's condition or as per the patient's, documentation, or it couldn't be just unique or standardized.
Well, you're right. I'm not saying that we're going to solve all the cures of the legal industry for this entire space. I'm saying that some problems are complicated and some problems are complex. This is a complex problem, but it's really not that complicated. They are doing business today. Lawyers are in there today. Lawyers are the cause of a lot of problems in medical research and in banking and in insurance and in many different industries. So the lawyers aren't going away. But one thing is true is that all the lawyers are paid to try to reduce the risk for the organization.
Right.
I mean, that is their job. And this system helps them to reduce that risk because
Right.
now they know who they're dealing with. They know that that person willingly entered into the terms and conditions. They have a legal precedent. They have the ability to have this contractual enforcement because of the implementation of a legal system that has legal standing, and they understand that whole
Okay,
world.
so
right?
then, I mean, the legal terms and conditions, those are provided by actually the organizations?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, I
yes.
see.
Now, but in the case of collective bargaining, which I think is the future, that when EXOCHAIN has 1 billion customers, then there's the opportunity to muscle up and say, hey, we don't like the terms and conditions of your software. We're going to tell all of our users not to use it because you have egregious terms and conditions. We're going to recommend that they switch to off of Messenger and onto
I mean,
Telegram.
my problem is then, because, usually when you participate in this kind of clinical research, you sign a contract, right? But I don't read it, right? That's the problem, right?
That's the problem.
But, I mean, the problem is not solved because, by putting it on the blockchain, it's not solving.
No,
Because
but
he's not going to read it anyway, and then he's just going to sign it.
No, but what will start to solve it is when the patient is knowingly taking control of their medical records and saying that I am not giving these to the world. I want to make sure that I can make them available to my children and my children's children and my children's children's children. That is when this will start to really flourish. We're not going to be able to unwind all of the different agreements that people made in the past, but we can seize the day today and we can start making progress forward and improve our level of control and access to our own information.
All right, so it's more like on the user side then, right?
Yes.
The benefit, right? Because they are now able to actually dictate the terms and conditions of the use of their data.
Yeah, I would say that it's actually on both sides, right? It's how do we create a win-win-win scenario, and it is a win for the user because they start to get control, but it's also a win for the organizations because their liability and their risk goes down the more they embrace this and use it.
And is that also? I mean, is that also a problem that there might be a chance that these organizations actually first they have this legal prince, but then later on something happens, some I don't know, maybe some class action is impending, in that case they change, is that kind of thing happening in the reality?
No, that absolutely is happening. Class action lawsuits happen all the time.
No, what I'm saying is that because this is all about because if the organizations put their terms and conditions on the blockchain, it's immutable, right?
Right.
That's the benefit, right?
Correct.
Right. They're binding, right?
Correct.
But I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't see the merit of that yet because right now, when a patient actually signs a contract, there are all kinds of these terms and comprehensive list of terms and conditions already there, right? And he has a copy, right? So if he wants to get to court, he can use that contract actually. So why do you need a blockchain to put it on, the blockchain, the terms and conditions? You understand what I'm saying, right? My questions.
Yeah, I do, and I think that there's just varying degrees of where the value is, and in some transactions, it's going to be more difficult to educate the consumer about what it is that they're signing.
Right.
And that is a piece that we've actually filed quite a few patents on.
All right.
So, we actually have multiple patents that have been filed. And really the parsing of terms and turning that into an API that allows the developer to code those terms in conjunction with the legal team of a pharmaceutical company, is absolutely there. Now, what we will say is, listen, if you want access to these patients under these terms and conditions, this is how it's going to be, and because remember, the pharmaceutical companies right now are failing. They are not returning the returns that the people want. They're creating customers, not cures, and less than 20% of the data that's being collected is being used. 80% of the data is being thrown away. So we're creating an overarching mechanism that is highly motivating to the pharmaceutical companies to come along with EXOCHAIN funded the Alliance for Clinical Research Excellence and Safety to develop a set of accreditation standards, and we have the 10-year exclusive right for recording those standards and empowering those standards using blockchain. So those standards will double the throughput of clinical research. That could likely double the profits of pharmaceutical companies. Right now, 90% of clinical research is all done on people of Northern European descent, white people. And so we're also using this strategy to open up the genome pool to the rest of the world. That solves a very expensive problem, finding patients and having those patients have the rights to make their data available for clinical research and progress. That is money. That is motivation for those organizations to change the way they do business.
Okay, so by your blockchain then, do you think the chance of these insurance companies or research clinics, the chance to kind of, use the patient's data without their permission, do you think it's going to be reduced significantly, or?
I would say it's going to, yes, absolutely. It's going to be reduced down to nearly zero.
Because it's traceable?
Because it's traceable and enforceable. Absolutely. And we're creating what's called a bailment under common law constructs, right? Where you have care and custody. If I'm giving you my data, you better take care of it. And if you lose it, you better have insurance on that. And by utilizing our system, those organizations can have lower cyber liability insurance rates, they can have lower general liability insurance rates, and they can more effectively transact with higher degrees of confidence.
So the system is more for preventing the loss of data, right? Then the exploitation of unpermissioned usage. It's rather for the loss, right? I mean, you want to prevent the loss of data, right? Because you put it on the blockchain, so it's not going to be lost anyway, right?
Well, we want to make sure it's not lost. We want to make sure it's not compromised. We want to make sure it's not tampered with.
Right.
We want to make sure that the information that is there.
What about the usage of the data without permission? I mean, that part is actually not resolved through your system.
So in some ways it is. So we did build into our system from day one GDPR compliance, for example, right? So the utilization of the mechanism for GDPR compliance for data that's been recorded on a blockchain is a subject of much contention right now. But we're utilizing the private key destruction. So now the information is encrypted. If the private keys are destructed, then it's virtually unassailable, right? No one can go and read that information.
Right.
So, but by utilizing a token, you can create a mechanism that allows you to make a data object and then make it accessible by a token. And that token is used the same way, the lowercase b Bitcoin protocol prevents the double spend of the capital B Bitcoin token to prevent the double spend of that piece of your identity or that piece of your data.
Okay.
So,
I understand. Oh, that's complicated.
Not really.
I understand.
Not really.
Have you any word for those, many, data management, platforms? Because they never spoke about this aspect. They're just talking about, I'm giving you back your rights, the ownership of your data, and you're the one who decide, with whom to share it.
Listen,
that's all they say.
Yeah. I think that there's many different great solutions out there. I'm not going to pretend that we are the best solution or that we know it all. What I will say is that, we have a very specific way of approaching this and then covering the solution, not just from a technological perspective, but also from the legal perspective. And it really requires that you have a solid understanding of who the parties are in that legal contract. And we think we can make that available to many other providers. We think that the interoperability between their systems is for them to figure out. But what we can do is provide a fabric that allows them to know who the parties are and then go ahead and create those interfaces and know that those interfaces are also equally legally enforceable.
Yeah. But I think, that's kind of, I'm not an expert in this area, but when I think about it, it kind of sounds very comprehensive. The blockchain and all the setting that you come up with. I think it's very comprehensive because I think that if you want to talk about data ownership and protecting privacy, I think you have to get at least to that extreme.
No, you do absolutely, yeah. And it is comprehensive, and we've got a wonderful team of people. You know, literally, I've cream skimmed from my Rolodex from an extensive career, the very best people. We have yet to have a single person that we approached say no. I mean, I have the chief architect for the U.S. Navy's portal, building ours. Right, he was one of the lead security solutions architects for Amazon Web Services before he came to us. Our chief revenue officer built the entire Oracle healthcare practice for 21 years. He left Oracle to come join us. When we tell people that we're going to double the rate of cures for cancer within a 10-year period, it changes the motivation, right? It's not just about what kind of float can you get on our token price. If that's your approach for investing in our company, please don't. Invest in our company because we have a vision for making the world a better place.
Yeah, I mean, right now I kind of know the story about your project, so I totally understand why you say that this ultimate cure, and it just seems possible through that kind of mechanism.
You said it seems impossible?
Possible.
Oh, it is possible.
Yeah.
So, I sit on the board of directors for the Alliance for Clinical Research Excellence and Safety. It's a global board. It's not just a U.S.-centric organization. The standards we've created were done with the British Standards Institute. They were released 2 weeks ago. They were endorsed by the New England Journal of Medicine. We're simply making it so that any clinical research site that, as they qualify, that their results are recorded into a blockchain. We're adding 400,000 clinical research sites in the very near future. And, I mean, it's very exciting.
And Leslie, my question is about your unique structure of the ICO. I mean, can you explain it just very briefly? Why you came up with that structure?
We came up with that structure because it was sort of...
First you have to explain, because I don't think you explained it. The structure, the ICO structure.
Yeah, so we have 7 $1 billion tranche. We have an ICO for $1 billion. It's $200 million in the pre-sale, $300 million in the public sale. $300 million are going to be used to create this network and to incentivize all of these folks, and $200 million are being returned to the team and the investors. And then each year for the next 7 years, there'll be another $1 billion token tranche. If you buy in on the pre-sale of the first tranche, you then have the right to buy in on the subsequent tranches, and that allows you to look at our metrics and determine whether or not we're achieving our KPIs and whether or not we're hitting our roadmap, and then decide to protect your investment by keeping the same position. Right?
It's like Daiko.
Over 7 years.
Yeah. I mean, per milestones.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And the reason that we're doing this is because we know that we can't boil the ocean. So we have to address market by market based on support and homologation and being able to support kanji and being able, there's many different aspects that we've baked into it, and we've tried to think these things through. But entering into a global market like healthcare and global banking and global insurance, is going to take time.
Right.
So we know that it's going to take time. So we're planning to enter into these markets, market by market by market, and show very steady progress.
Right. In the case, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. But for instance, it's not working for a certain industry. In that case, you're not going to actually take in any more funding, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Any last words for the audience?
I can't remember.
Are you ready for the next challenge?
Are you ready for the next challenge?
Yeah, from the Time of Life challenge. Thank you very much, Bob.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.